The first paper money in history was not designed to be money. It was a receipt, a piece of paper proving that somewhere, in a shop, a pile of coins was waiting for you. Nobody set out to invent currency made of paper. It backed into existence sideways, because the money people were already using had become almost too heavy to carry, and once it existed, it produced a second thing nobody intended. The first paper money inflation in human history. The story of paper money is the story of two accidents, one that created it and one that nearly destroyed it. The problem that started everything was physical, and it was absurd. In the Chinese province of Sichuan, the local currency was not copper but iron. Iron coins were heavy and worth very little, which meant you needed a great many of them to buy anything. 1,000 iron coins weighed roughly 25 kilograms. Buying a single bolt of silk could require dozens of kilograms of coins, a load you would struggle to lift, let alone carry to market. The currency worked against the very purpose of currency. Money is supposed to make trade easier. In Sichuan, the money was the obstacle. There was already a hint of a solution in the dynasty before. During the Tang Dynasty, which ran from the 7th to the early 10th century, China's economy grew faster than the government could mint coins, and copper was often scarce. Merchants trading goods like tea over long distances did not want to haul metal across the country, risking robbery on the road. So they developed something called feiqiang, which translates as flying money. A merchant would deposit his coins at an office in one city and receive a paper certificate. The certificate was issued in two halves. The merchant carried one, the other was sent ahead to the matching office, and when the two halves were checked against each other, the merchant collected his money at the destination. It is tempting to call this the first paper money, but it was not. Flying money was a transfer system, closer to a money order than to cash. It moved value between two fixed points. You could not spend it. It did not pass from hand to hand the way money does. It solved the problem of moving coins, not the problem of using them. The real invention was still to come, and it came in Sichuan, out of those unbearable iron coins. Here is where the accident happened. Merchants in Sichuan began depositing their heavy iron coins with trusted shops and taking paper receipts in return. The receipt recorded how much money you had on deposit. At first, that is all it was, a claim slip, redeemable for the coins, but people noticed something. If a piece of paper reliably represented a sum of coins, then handing over the paper was the same as handing over the coins, without the weight. So instead of redeeming the receipts, merchants started using the receipts themselves to pay for goods. The paper began circulating. A deposit slip had quietly turned into money. These notes were called Jiaozi, and historians regard them as the first true paper money in the world. In the earliest days, the system was loose to the point of being chaotic. The amount on a Jiaozi was handwritten, which meant there was effectively no limit to what a single note could be worth. And there was no standard design. Anyone holding one had to trust that the shop behind it was good for the coins. After about 5 years of these notes circulating, the 16 largest merchant houses in Sichuan joined together and founded a paper note bank to standardize the notes, giving them a common form. The local government then recognized these private notes as an official means of payment. Converting a note back into coins carried a fee of 30 coins per thousand, 3% the price of the convenience. Then the system hit its first crisis, and it is the crisis that defines everything that followed. Some of the merchant companies issued more notes than they could back, and several went bankrupt. The paper was only as trustworthy as the coins promised behind it, and when that promise broke, the notes lost their value. So the government stepped in. The Song Dynasty nationalized paper money. In the year 1023, following a proposal by a local official named Shi Tian, it founded a paper notes office in Chengdu. And in 1024, it issued the first series of standardized government notes. This was the first government-issued paper currency in the world. To put that in perspective, paper money would not appear in Europe for roughly another 600 years. And this is the second accident, the dangerous one. Once a government can print money on paper, it discovers that it can print money on paper. A coin has to be struck from actual metal. A note only has to be printed. When a state runs short of funds, especially during war, the temptation to simply issue more notes is enormous, and the cost of doing so looks like nothing. Over-issuance began almost immediately, and with it came inflation. The notes caused rising prices because there were more of them chasing the same goods. The pattern repeated for centuries, getting worse each time the state was under pressure. Under the Jin Dynasty, in the 12th and early 13th centuries, paper was issued in such excess that earlier notes became nearly worthless. A currency reform around 1160 tried to fix it, and hyperinflation returned within a few years. The wars against the Mongols drained the treasury, and the printing press was the easiest way to fill it. When the Mongols themselves took power and established the Yuan dynasty in the late 13th century, they tried to discipline the system. They backed their paper money with silver, the first paper currency in history, tied to a precious metal, and for nearly half a century prices stayed relatively stable. It was during this period that Marco Polo, in his account of his travels published in 1298, described to European readers the strange sight of an empire running on money made of paper. But the discipline did not hold. Military pressure, and especially civil war, created fiscal demands that the rulers met the same way every regime before them had, by printing. The silver backing was loosened, then effectively abandoned, and the yuan ended in hyperinflation as the dynasty collapsed in 1368. The Ming dynasty that followed issued its own notes, the Great Ming Treasure Note, beginning in the 1370s. The notes carried a printed warning that counterfeiters would be executed and informants richly rewarded, a sign of how much the state needed people to trust the paper. It did not help. The same cycle ran again. By the early 1400s, the ratio between the paper notes and actual coins had passed 300 to 1. The notes drained out of circulation, and there are no known references to paper money being used in China after 1455. So the civilization that invented paper money gave it up. After roughly 650 years, China abandoned its own creation, returned to silver, and did not use paper currency again for about 450 years, not until the 1890s. The invention had been too powerful and too easy to abuse. The thing that made paper money brilliant, that it cost almost nothing to produce, was exactly the thing that made it dangerous in the hands of a government that needed money it did not have. Trace the whole arc and the two accidents stand out clearly. No one in Sichuan was trying to reinvent money. They were trying to avoid carrying 25 kilograms of iron to buy a bolt of cloth, and the receipts they used to escape that weight quietly became currency on their own. And no one issuing those first notes intended to invent inflation. They were solving a shortage, filling a treasury, paying for a war, and the unbacked paper they printed taught the world a lesson it would keep relearning for the next 1,000 years. Paper money was not handed down by economists or planned by a mint. It was a workaround that escaped, and then a temptation that no government could resist.